I've developed this with my colleague Dale Larson. We're both business coaches, and I've been doing that for the last, say, 4 years, and I tend to work with entrepreneurs everywhere in the food chain, from a very shred of an idea to growth, and then to sort of entrepreneurs' midlife crisis. Actually, we both do. And what we're seeing is a sort of new breed of entrepreneur, and so I'm going to talk about. First, I just want to say what I'm noticing is the entrepreneurs that I'm meeting with, and especially that are just founding companies right now, are thinking, believing, and acting in a completely different way than I've seen before. So I've seen things approaching this, but we're really seeing a completely new paradigm. So we decided, okay, let's try and encapsulate this and come up with some principles. So each one of these could be its own 15-minute talk, but I'm going to run through it real quick. First one is that the individual and the company often has a goal for themselves beyond just making money. So their company is moving in a specific direction that may be disruptive, and maybe we're going to be the best at what we're going to do, but it's not just we're going to make an incrementally better something or incrementally cheaper something. They're really out to cause change in the world or in their local community. The second is that they want to create a working environment and a pace that's reasonable and sustainable. And reasonable and sustainable can mean different things to different groups. For some groups, it means working 8 days a week and never eating, never sleeping, but everyone agrees on that. For other groups, it's a sort of 9 to 5, like we've actually agreed that we want to have lives and we have little kids and this is what we need to do. But all the founders on the team pretty much agree. This is how we want to do it together. The third is they want to create a product or a service that their customers really love. Often they're interested in creating a thriving ecosystem, and they actually want to extend this love into their vendors, the other people they deal with. Their sort of idea is we want to create deep relationships, and we want our customers to be delighted. The fourth is that they're very intent on hiring and retaining the A team. So they're doing behavioral interviewing to screen for people who won't fit well with the team. They realize that the founding team and then sort of the next layer out and beyond that is going to create the DNA of the company that's going to move them forward. And so they get really, really nitpicky. Like I have founders that have been kind of dating for 3 to 6 months working on little side projects together to see, do I really like you or do I just mostly like you? And that's different than just kind of smash. Okay, yeah, let's do this thing together. And the no assholes thing turns out to be really important because when you end up with an asshole, it's basically someone who's kind of in it for themselves, embedded in the company. It turns out to be super difficult to get rid of them and just really difficult for everyone around it. It creates a tragic culture. The fifth is actually my favorite. The entrepreneurs themselves have an attitude of learning and growth. So it means that they're interested as a company in learning from their experiences, be it success or failure. They're likely to have retrospectives. They're interested as individuals in almost running a startup as a vehicle for their own transformation. They're not quite there all the time, but a lot of times they're curious about, so if this thing happened to me, what do I get to learn out of that? If this thing happened to us as a company, what are we going to take away from it? So it means they have a lot of curiosity. They're willing to talk about failure. It's not uncommon for somebody on the team to get up in front of everyone and say, yeah, that totally didn't work. We had a great idea, but eh. And throughout the organization, everybody's willing to do that. Sixth is that they maintain a steady velocity. And so they're inclined to make decisions if it's a low risk to move forward. And they're inclined towards sort of constant motion. There isn't a lot of, oh, we're not sure, we have to think about that for a really long time. They're doing something to measure the progress that they're making, both as a company and as individuals. And so they're kind of unlikely to be stagnant. And seventh, and this is my second favorite, people are kind and collaborative within the organization. There's a sense of, I want to be in this with you other people. if there are differing viewpoints on the team. In fact, if you oppose me and you believe the exact opposite that I do, that makes me more curious to sit down with you and say, wow, you're really smart. You believe the exact opposite thing that I do? I want to talk about that. I want to learn from it, which is very different than you believe the opposite that I do. All right, out the door. And I suppose, in a sense, you're selecting for people who believe all these things, so the people who don't believe all these things are not sort of just sitting across the table from.
So where are these companies and where do I sign up?
I'm working with some of the entrepreneurs that are starting these companies, so happy to refer.
Hypothetical archetype.
No, it's real. It's real.
No, it's real.
Alan, it's a hypothetical archetype, but when you get people who are willing to sign up to try to do these things, then it means that you have some sort of metric, and when they're not doing one of those things, as a team, they self-correct with each other and say, yeah, I don't think this adheres to this principle. What should we do about that? The founders actually have a huge impact on their company's DNA. The easiest way to create a company culture is for the founders to agree on what they want and to hire for that, talk about that, act on that sort of the whole way through the company. The next thing I'm interested after sort of testing this out with a bunch of different groups to see am I mostly hitting the mark or am I missing on any of these 7, is to actually create a proactive toolkit that I can use to measure a company's culture. Something like a quick online survey that you could give to the whole staff and be able to see, how are we doing on all these 7 axes? Do we rate a 10 in terms of hiring and keeping the A-team and no assholes? Or are we down at a 3? Because once you can measure things like that, just like you could have maybe a operational dashboard, then you can start to take action based on the information that you're getting. And so here they all are all in one place. And I'd be curious to hear what people think and if this makes sense.
Awesome.
So much that I want to talk to you about. Oh my God. A couple quick things. One is I have experienced a lot of this as well. And I wonder whether I suspect that I have always suspected that it's because of where I'm getting my companies from, that there's this kind of self-selection. This is the kind of company I want to work with, so I just don't work with the assholes. But I have this suspicion that most of the venture-funded startups are assholes that just want to make a lot of money. And I'm very interested that you're observing this on a broader scale.
These companies, are the founders, do they have a background in being a maker of some kind? And also have the business acumen or financial savvy to start a company, that entrepreneurial spirit? Or are they business people?
No, they're makers.
Okay.
Primarily.
One thing just to comment about this, about is it relevant to Agile UX, I think a lot of the things here are very relevant to the topics that this retreat have touched on, especially with the kind and collaborative bit and the attitude of learning and growth. And one of the things that we touched on in the first retreat was the not the us and them thing, that the designers and developers coming together, like that's the purpose of this. We're trying to learn from each other and transform things. So I thought it is very relevant to this level.
Nice. Thanks, Joseph. Zach.
How important do you think is the stating the stuff like straight out before you start anything, or can it evolve? I feel like we've evolved a lot of this stuff completely accidentally.
So awesome if you've evolved it completely accidentally. I think it's not mandatory to do it up front, but if you do it up front, just like if you had code guidelines up front, it's much more likely to happen. And if you can get people to agree to something like this, even if it's not exactly this, but even if you say, okay, here's some core beliefs we're going to operate with, then when you get the outlier founder, somebody who's like, no, actually, I don't like doing it this way, or I don't think we'll make enough money if we do blah, I'd rather do this. Then you have something to point back to and say, so we promised people this. We said this was important. Let's see if we can find a way to include it. And it's different than the conversation where you're bringing it in later and then saying, well, we'll try.
Sort of creating a social contract.
Desiree.
I just wanted to tie this into not startup, just because a little bit of what you're saying reminds me of a talk I found really interesting at Agile last year that Mary Poppendick was talking about, where she was saying in large companies, how you can treat some projects as if, what would happen if companies thought about having projects that employees signed up for instead of randomly staffing projects? What would be the qualities of those projects? You know, what is it that makes people want to volunteer and do stuff? And I don't think it's a coincidence that some of these things that you've identified in terms of startup success factors do map onto the kinds of things that people tend to want to work on, right? And so, and in a way, that's what a startup is, right? It's a bunch of people who are spontaneously getting together to start something. So, how do you kind of put that into, a larger organization or culture?
So just a quick point that we actually just started open market project inside of Salesforce, which is I wasn't familiar with it until we introduced it. I'm sure it's out there. But the concept is exactly that. If you have a compelling project, then at the beginning of a release cycle, you say, hey, I need someone to do QA for this project, and here's why it's cool. And everyone has the opportunity to sort of move around to the project that they're interested in.
Yes.
And so it's challenging right now, but I think it's really, really promising.
And I think the challenges are in sort of aligning the business interest and the cool, sexy project, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Google does this a lot, and they always are perennially having staffing problems on the less interesting projects. Yeah, but they do that.
This is a brilliant list. I thank you very much for doing this. I'm going to steal this. Thank you. I'm going to give you credit, but I'm stealing it. But I just want to say something. I started my first company, my first entrepreneurial software company in 1975. And absolutely, this was who we were, and this is what defined us. This was entrepreneurism in the microcomputer entrepreneurial revolution before there was such a thing as Silicon Valley. And what happened was the money people came in and fucked it up. and I am
this is why you stay private.
I'm so happy that we're persevering. The practitioners are persevering and pulling through that crap and bringing this back to the top. We didn't articulate it anywhere near like this. It was this. I mean, it's wonderful that it's being stated. And it needs to cut through the crap of all the money. But these are timeless entrepreneurial values. And when entrepreneurs come along and say, we're going to make $1 million, $1 billion, they're not entrepreneurs. They're not. Because entrepreneurs do not set out to make money. Entrepreneurs set out to change the world, and if we make money along the way, that's gravy. And this is great. Thank you.
Can I stand up and cheer at that speech?
Yeah. Okay, so point of order, we're at the 15-minute mark.
It always goes
What
like
process have we captured? Is this self-evident? Have we captured the insights that we captured from this?
Right, that was exactly where I was going. So we naturally transitioned into Q&A, but we didn't necessarily do capturing. We were going to do capture salient points on note cards. I'm not sure if that's the right process.
I think it is the right process, but this is so beautifully captured.
Yeah.
Okay.
This slide is the caption.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
I'm going to get that tattooed on my ass.
You should put that quote on your website. That is
Alan Cooper.
That is the back.
That's the customer testimonial.
No pictures.
Pixar didn't happen.